every time I load. I've played Counter-Strike for Global Offensive only for 22,000 hours. Now, let's just say some of it was idle, probably like 19,000 hours. And I can tell you right now that very rarely do I ever feel like I'm in the same game on repeat.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is Visionaries, a once-weekly live show featuring some of the most successful folks in gaming, new media, the creator economy, and nerd culture. We are joined today by Flom, the longtime content creator in the gaming space, known best for his time in Counter-Strike, which he is one of the preeminent people creating content right now about Counter-Strike 2. Which is set to release this summer and is currently in live beta testing over the past couple of weeks. Flom, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on.
I feel like the two of us have like crossed paths a lot of times, but I think maybe we've only ever said hello to each other like once, because like at an event, maybe at DreamHack or something over the years. But like, I've like followed your career for so long. I don't know why we've never like done anything together. This is fun. I'm glad to have you here.
I don't leave the house much, so this is a much better format, you know? It's a lot easier that way.
Yeah. So what initial impressions? We'll start light. Like, what are your initial impressions here? You know, Valve's started rolling out CS2 last week. What are your thoughts here with like a little bit more than a week hands on in the game? And obviously you got to play in the private test as well. So
do you
curious
mean
what your
my
thoughts
first
are.
Impressions of CS2 right now, or my impressions when I first was in Seattle?
Both, actually. I would love both.
You pick which one I start with, and I'll start there. Playtest.
So Seattle, yeah. Let's talk about like the private playtest that you got to do. What did you think when you first got to go up there and give it a shot?
Well, I mean, when I got the email, I honestly thought I was kind of getting trolled. Like, I just was like, "Are you serious? You know, like, is this? Are you? I don't know. It was really weird. I didn't really. I had talked with the devs previously, but I didn't really expect like this or anything like this would ever happen. So initial impressions when I got to Seattle is, first off, I got to see like a lot of my friends that were also in the playtest, and that was just already cool. And second, we all kind of knew it was Source 2, but we didn't actually get told and we had no idea. Like, until we literally walked in and booted up, they wouldn't tell us like the whole time. We kind of know, but you know, until you hear it, you're like, oh shit. And the first impressions were, just similar to how when it first dropped live. I looked down in a deathmatch and I was like, wow, we got feet. I know that sounds stupid, but that was just the first thing we did when we got in. And everybody's just like, we're just in a deathmatch server, and it's like, oh, yep. Counter-Strike players get amused and entertained by the smallest changes to the game because nothing happens to the game that much. So you're just like, graphically, like when we got in, I was kind of, I didn't know what to expect, but I guess I would say I was very surprised. It's like subtle, right? Like if you were to just look at Counter-Strike 2 right now and people running around on Dust 2, it's not, you're not like, wow, this is insane. But for a CS player, it really felt like, I really felt like my eyes were open for the first time. And it was actually really hard to come back playing CSGO and just kind of like knowing now how ugly the game is. Like, it's like you have to go back and just pretend like you didn't see any of that. And you know, I was just like, damn, this game kind of ugly now. But first initial impressions were shock, excitement, and kind of exceeded my expectations. But I also tried to not have any because I didn't know what I was going there for. There was audio issues at the start, and I kind of talked about this on my stream a little bit. The first day of the playtest was a bit rough because the audio mix was so scuffed on the engine that it was really kind of hard to get a grasp for like what felt good and bad. And you don't even realize how good Counter-Strike audio is right now in Global Offensive until you hear when it's bad. You know, you can't even like begin to process the things that, like, the information we didn't have access to. That was really making it hard. But credit to the devs, we play tested for 10 hours that day, and then we all went to have dinner, and then the devs stayed afterwards and they redid the entire audio mix overnight on those extra few hours, redid in the engine, and then we came back and it was significantly better almost overnight. And it was like night and day. And then we start to kind of like get into like, okay, what do and don't we like? What did we notice? And stuff like that. So initial playtest was, audio was bad, everything else was great. I mean, most people noticed like the movement stuff and the sprays, but that kind of came later on once the audio was more balanced. And then I would say first impressions of CS2 when it dropped was it felt like it was running smoother than in the playtest, which obviously, you know, with a lot more time, that it's still I would guess it's really still not even in their focus is optimization, because I feel like that'll come later once they want gameplay feedback, right? Like they want to know, hey, how does this feel? How does this is this good, bad, whatever? And so for now, I still think optimization, it actually feels pretty good, but there's still definitely some hitches and hiccups here and there. With it actually dropping live, overall, I was pretty happy with like where it had come from the playtest, and knowing how quickly they did things while we were there. I can only imagine now that the beta is live how quickly they're going to progress the game with the limited test beta.
Yeah, you were talking about sort of the like it almost being like a flashbang, how different it looks. You know, like I'll pull up your stream or Shroud or someone else who has playtest access, and I'm just like sort of, it's so much more bright.
Yeah,
like that's the immediate like thing that catches your eye. Like watching like Dust 2 in particular, just like, god damn, that map was like super faded in Global Offensive, right? Like it's and before that too. Like it's but I think the one thing that CS has always had, and I think this is the thing that like I'm excited for new players to try when this drops overall and comes out for real, is like Counter-Strike is one of the most smooth games from a movement perspective, and it has been for a very long time. Like it feels good to play Counter-Strike. It doesn't matter if it looks bad, if Global Offensive looks bad, like it doesn't matter. It's so smooth. It is so smooth. There's no feeling like that in any other game.
That Source engine, man. That's what I mean. It's like, I know it's not really the same because it's so modified, but I mean, look at like Apex, for example. Apex technically is the Source engine, you know, and Counter-Strike, every game that's on the Source engine always actually just has, I feel like, good movement. It's incredible. Hopefully CS2 gets there. Hopefully it's not there quite yet, but it'll take some time.
How I want to ask you about longevity, you know, like sort of have a little bit of a meta conversation here, because like Global Offensive has had, the entire franchise has had like, you know, 20 plus years longevity now, right? Like, and Global Offensive itself has been out for a decade and is still hitting new highs and records, right? Like the player number record after it went free to play a couple years ago just like ballooned up again. And I think that was a smart decision from Valve. Like, I don't know, I think it was $20 before it went free to play. And like, sure, that's not a huge barrier to entry, but I think at least more people are giving it a shot when it went free to play. Why do you think this franchise has found its stride in longevity? What makes it stick around is the way that it has for this 20 years of lifespan?
I mean, for one, just like watching it, easy accessibility. I would say first off is like, it's, even if you're not watching, you know, people always talk about the esports side of it, but even, you know, exclude the esports side of it. You're if somebody says, do you want to play this? And you get into your first Counter-Strike game, nobody has to explain to you what an HE grenade is, right? There's so many elements of the game that make it actually, there are a lot of things system wise with Counter-Strike that make it not user friendly, but I feel like initial impressions when you first get in, it's relatively like, oh, I get this. Like, I get what this is used for. I understand what a smoke grenade is used for. I understand like these basic things, but also, you know, as soon as you kind of like dive into Counter-Strike a little bit, you just realize how crazy it is. And then you kind of go down that rabbit hole and you're just sucked in. Like if you get to past like a certain point, you're just, there's always, your spray could be a little bit better, your movement could be a little bit better, you learn this new thing, this new little like every little thing. Even with Counter-Strike Global Offensive being out 10 years, you're still finding things in professional play or just in casual play all the time where somebody's just adding like a little bit of flair, right? Or like a little, just slight alterations here and there, but they're completely game defining sometimes. And I don't know, it just gives you massive replayability. Every time I've played Counter-Strike for Global Offensive only for 22,000 hours. Now let's just say some of it was idle, probably like 19,000 hours, and I can tell you right now that very rarely do I ever feel like I'm in the same game on repeat. Now CS2 right now on Dust 2, I definitely feel like some games are on repeat, but like like it just always feels like I'm doing something. The game always just feels new to me. Not like brand new. I'm not gonna like try to oversell it or something like that, but every game kind of has its own story, and it's really fun when you're playing.
It has variance. Yeah. It has variance. Yeah, I started like maybe like 2 months ago a group of buddies of mine who are not like longtime Counter-Strike guys. They've all gotten into it. Most of them have gotten into it in the past 5 years. I've been playing since close to when Global Offensive came out, and I just hadn't played in a long time. And I like bought us like a Pop Flash server, and now we play like every Wednesday prior to my arm surgery. So like we like do like 10-man in-houses. So we've got like a whole Discord thing going, and it's like there's just so much variance. I think that's what I like the most about it. What you're saying, like it, and it does what I think multiplayer games, competitive multiplayer games should do, which is it's exactly what you said, saying it a different way, is it's easy to learn but hard to master, right? Like you can learn the maps, you can learn the callouts, you can learn the movement, you can learn the gun sprays, but being super high skilled at it, ranking up in it, or getting to a point where you can play in any of the other online services and like hold your own, that takes a long time, right? Like there is a challenge to it, but at the most basic level, it's easy to get into.
No, absolutely, yeah. I think, yeah, that's usually you phrased it much more beautifully than I did. That's for sure. But yeah, I think that hits it on the head.
So in terms of Counter-Strike 2, and like when you're thinking about, you've gotten to have some times or hands-on time with it the past week. Obviously, you're like aware of some new content that I'm sure some you can talk about and some you can't. In terms of like how you think this will push the franchise forward at a time where like PC gaming is growing, rapidly increasing, way bigger now than when Global Offensive came out a decade ago. What do you think Counter-Strike 2 will do for that community and like engaging new players, etc.?
Well, I mean, I think like first, it's hard to say, honestly. I could truthfully say I always get shit for this because I was under NDA before and I kept saying I didn't know anything, but no, like everything I did at the playtest, I can talk about. And I can tell you that unfortunately, I don't know anything about what they plan on doing with the systems. And that brings me to my next point. I think that's like the biggest like barrier of entry for most people with Counter-Strike, because nobody that's ever really sunk their teeth into Counter-Strike, even if they're like, this isn't my game, I don't think many people walk away going, man, that gameplay wasn't good. Right, it's more like, oh, okay, the system doesn't feel good, ranking up doesn't feel good, the queue time, whatever. Like, I think it's the systems that surround the game right now in Global Offensive that hamper a lot of new players from really diving into it, especially if you don't have people around you that already play. It's really hard to just kind of like just jump in and play. It's just hard. There's really no sugarcoating it. Counter-Strike Global Offensive, like, added matchmaking and to its game, and it's skyrocketed in popularity, but also it's kind of been the same since they added it. It's never really evolved, and that's always been, I don't think there's a single person that would really just disagree that that's kind of the problem with like bringing in new players. It still brings in new players, as you can see from the player count. It's a fantastic game, so even with that people still are like, this is insane, and they love playing it. But I think when it comes to CS2, it's kind of like we have to wait and see. I think it's only going to grow with popularity, but how far it grows and how much it grows, I think it comes back to what changes they make to matchmaking. Like, how do they streamline the system? Are they going to streamline the system? Do they make it more accessible for new players? How are they going to deal with like cheating, right? Because that's always been a big problem in Go, right? They have a bunch of different systems in Go that really it feels like a bunch of things that they're trying to kind of see how they win. And now maybe with what they've learned, they can implement something in CS2 that makes a lot of sense for everybody. But I honestly don't know. Like, it's nerve-wracking because as somebody that wants everybody to play and love Counter-Strike as much as I do, I don't know. I'm just as in the dark as everybody else. Now, in terms of like the maps and stuff like that, I can tell you we did get to play test other maps. I've already kind of talked about them a little bit. We got to play everything. We had Dust 2, we had Mirage, we had Nuke, Overpass, Ancient, and I think that's all of it. We didn't play Vertigo or Inferno. And I think, like, for a lot of new players, the game's definitely going to feel updated when you play some of those other maps, especially. So that'll give, like, the new shiny thing, so to speak, that everybody likes to talk about when it comes to games. It'll give you a more updated feel. People that are like, I don't really see a difference when they just load up Dust 2 and CS2 right now, I kind of understand their sentiment. I don't really disagree even. Like, if you were just glancing at Dust 2 right now, it looks better if you're a CS player. But if you're not a CS player, you're not really seeing anything right now that's like make like giving it a big distinction. However, I will say with like a map like Overpass, Ancient, or Nuke, you might see a very drastic difference where you're like, okay, I understand like what the engine's doing now. But to kind of circle back, I think it really is just going to kind of boil down to what systems they implement going forward with matchmaking in terms of how much growth you see. I think there's going to inevitably be growth. Counter-Strike has just always grown, and as long as they make the gameplay feel close to the same, they really iron out like kind of what people are complaining about right now, I don't see how it wouldn't continue to grow. It's just a matter of how much.
What do you think the ceiling is? Because I think for me, when I got to play test and was part of the early part of Valorant a couple of years ago, and I think the one thing Valorant made me realize is how popular with additional marketing and the rollout that they did and some of the early events that they did around Valorant, not just the esports stuff, but some of the in-game stuff as well, how popular attack shooter can be at rollout, right? Like how many people were talking about it. Yeah. And I think Valorant is not gotten as big as CS from a player base perspective. And part of that, I think, too, boils down to like Valve owns the biggest PC gaming market in the world in Steam. And like when you have a free to play game that's in your market that you can put on your front page at zero cost, that's a huge advantage, right? Like there's so many people and eyeballs that you're catching casually of people that just open the Steam page and they're like, oh, I'll give this thing a shot, right? And so Valorant's not reached CS's highs, but I think Valve took a much with Go and with the iterations before that, although it's a very different time in gaming when you start talking about, Source and 1.6 and Condition Zero, like it is like the gaming has changed a lot. So I don't think it's worth comparing to the older versions. I think it's worth maybe talking about Go and how PC gaming has changed as a whole. But I think there's a ceiling here for this. And I'm curious how high you think the ceiling is. Like how many people could truly get into attack shooter and be engaged with this thing?
I really don't know. I mean, I feel like you kind of want me to give you a number, but I honestly have no idea. I mean, like technically, I guess the game did pass like 1.5 million concurrent already, right? It's doing like, I think like during COVID, it had like 25 or 26 million uniques per month. I honestly don't know. I really have never thought about this. I just kind of think of it more of like a general perspective. I would say like I could see it if they kind of nail down like the recoil and the movement. I could see it like maybe hitting like that 2 million concurrent at some point or something like that. But I don't know. It depends on like what Valve also does. I think kind of like I said, it just comes down to like those systems. If it becomes a very accessible game for a lot of people, I think that is literally the barrier of entry for so many people that, for example, like Valorant, right? Like there's absolutely nothing wrong with somebody wanting to play a game and they can hop on, just invite their friends and hit play and they don't have to really think about it. And I feel like in Counter-Strike, that's not really what you have to do, right? You have to hop on, invite your friends. Do we all have Prime? Are we going to play on matchmaking? Are we going to play on Face It? What if we run into a cheater? Are we all trusted? Like, there's so many like of these systems that just aren't really streamlined into the game that make it, it feels like a chore, right? Sometimes to just like try to get on and play. When you're used to it and you kind of have like your routine, it doesn't feel that way. But for a lot of people that just want to hop on for a few hours a night, it's not that accessible of a game. I'm not trying to make it seem like you literally can't play the game, but it's harder, I think. I just think that the barrier of entry or like the feeling of hopping on and playing is just a little bit more streamlined in Valorant versus CS. And that will kind of dictate, the game's growth.
That's a fair point. Yeah, I think it can be a little intimidating if you don't have your group. Like it's not a good solo play game at all. It's just not the great experience. Not that Valorant is like significantly better, but I can get by like soloing in Valorant and not feel weird about it. It's soloing in CS is hard in normal MM at least.
It's not really. Yeah, I can't really speak to how it feels in the matchmaking experience because I just sit there and play Face It most of the time. And when I play solo queue, most of the time people, it's not. I don't know. I don't like it in either game. It's terrible. I just simply mean when you load up the game and you want to play, it just feels a lot simpler in Valorant. Right. Where in Counter-Strike, I just feel like there's a couple things there that are kind of It's like, what does this even mean? Imagine you get into you invite your friend and he has bad trust, and it's like, this person has trust. Did you know? I don't know if they changed this, but if you are the person with bad trust factor, it tells your person that's in your party with you, but they don't tell you. It's like Valve almost like shits on you. So like when I had a griefing ban, and when I came back, when people played with me, I wouldn't see it. We would queue it and be like, by the way, this guy's got bad trust. You sure you want to do this? Like it's like all right, man. Like so it just I'm curious to see what it looks like with different systems. Hopefully, different systems that they add.
Do you think there's lessons? Obviously, like this is all speculating because I'm sure you've had contained conversations with the dev team. But do you think there's been lessons learned from Valorant over the past couple of years that things that can be applied to CS2?
You mean like do you think they actively look at Valorant and like see what things they could take and bring over, kind of thing?
Correct.
Okay. Explicitly talking with the devs, I don't think there is like. I'm sure there is, but when we talk, like the devs are kind of exactly how you expect somebody that a Valve dev is to react to things. It's like they're listening to you. You know they listen to you and they hear everything that you say, but they just simply want to like go further down the rabbit hole, but they never give you any sort of insight on what they're thinking. So, like for example, I suggested to them, BackNet, for example, is AI anti-cheat that they have. That if you don't know how it works, just short version, it is AI that can detect if you're cheating or not. And how it works now is it automatically sends you to Overwatch, which is people review that and then determine if you're cheating or not. Then you're banned. So it doesn't really have like power. But I was suggesting that maybe in CS2 it has. I think they've talked about it in a seminar, one of those dev seminars that's like way too cool that most people, it kind of flies under the radar most of the time. I think they talked about it having like a pretty accurate rating. I don't want to say a number and be wrong, but it was pretty good. And I was like, why not just give VacNet maybe like temporary power, right? Like it can temporarily put somebody on a cooldown if it's like thinks somebody's cheating, and then just have somebody review it. But then even suggesting that, it's not that they said no. It's just they're like, okay, but like, how would you handle people getting thrown in there multiple times if they're not cheating, stuff like that? So I don't really know what they do or don't take from other people, because even when you talk with them, it's not that they deny that anything. They just simply like, oh, so you want something like that, tell me why, right? Or like, let's explore more of this. But at the end of it, there's no like, yeah, we might look at that. No, there's nothing. It's like, oh, all right, yeah, well, all good. Like, so I'm sure they look at other games all the time, whether it's Valorant or whatever, because every developer does. Anybody that's good at their job looks at anybody and anything where they can take something and use it themselves. Streamers do it. Everybody does it. Like it's I always forget who. I think Tim the Tapman was like copying or like stealing somebody's shit is like the highest form of flattery when it comes to content creation, because it means you're doing something right. Like everybody's like, okay, you're doing this, we should do this too. So I'm sure they do. Have they ever told me like, yeah, we saw this in Valorant and we wanted to? No, never. Never once did that come up in any way. It's just like, but it's hard to know anything that they're thinking about. Even somebody like me who gets to talk to them pretty regularly, I don't know what the hell they're thinking. I'll be honest. I don't know. I'm kind of along the ride, just like everybody else.
Are there things that you would take in their position? Are there things, and not just Valorant, any of the other shooter games that have come out in the past like decade, especially the ones that people play more of, right? Like Rainbow Six Siege, Apex Legends, Valorant, etc. Are there things that you would take from some of those games that you think would make it better?
Yeah, I've kind of gone down this rabbit hole a little bit and talked about it on my own stream, which is just like, they already have something in Counter-Strike that I really like. It's a bit controversial because, and I actually suggested this as well, and they were like poking holes in it as they do. But they have a system called Premiere, which is Premiere. You go into a game and you get to veto. Every person on the team gets to vote, and you get to veto maps while you're in the server. And then based on the veto between the two teams, that's the map that you play. So it's not random, right? Like Valorant, that you don't, you know how like in Valorant you can get the same map technically, right? You're not supposed to, but it's a low percentage, but it can absolutely still like happen. Or like you might play it every other game and like you can bounce back and forth. Point is it's random and it can end up kind of being an unenjoyable experience. And for Premiere, you'll probably end up with the more popular maps most of the time, but you also still get a say, which I like. I think And then if you eliminate a lot of like what right now in Counter-Strike I don't like is I love all the maps in Counter-Strike. I love the diversity that we have with tons of troll maps, or like the fact that you could queue office is fun. But also, do I think somebody should be able to only queue office and get global? No. I feel like that immediately devalues the point of what being global elite is. Or just being the highest rank in the competitive queue, I think kind of, oh, well, I only played office to do it, right? Like, okay, I feel like you didn't really go through the same thing that I did necessarily, or whoever that gets there. It kind of devalues it when you can do stuff like that. So something like making that premier system where you have the vetoes just being the only option for a competitive queue, and then separating the other maps that they have into a different style of queue as well, I think would be much better. So for example, you would load up Counter-Strike, you hit play, and when you hit like competitive ranked, it's just the premier mode. That's it. That would cut down queue times. It would make it so you always have a vote on what you're playing. And sure, you'd probably end up on the more favorite maps most of the time. And a lot of people don't like that. So that's why like it could be a problem, because some people load up, right? And they love that in Counter-Strike, you can play the game and you don't have to play certain maps. That people like that a lot. So that would be taken away. So it's kind of this, what do you think is best? Like, do you want to streamline it? I would say for accessibility and for getting like fastest queue times with the most competitive games, that would be the way to do it. But obviously there's a lot of things that go into that, where you've previously given the player base the total option to choose between any map they want at any given time, and then you're going to take that away. So that could be a bit shitty for people that really just like want to hop on for a night and be like, I just want to play Mirage tonight. I personally despise that, but like if that's what you want to do, right? Like, but if that's what you want to do, maybe you should be allowed to do that. And that's kind of, I don't know. I would prefer it my way, obviously, but I can see absolutely the other side of it, where people really enjoy the ability to be able to choose and completely customize the way that they want to play Counter-Strike when they play it.
We're going to start taking some audience questions. I know we see a good amount of people listening here, so thank you for being here. If you want to ask a question for Flom towards the end of the podcast, you can. There's a pinned tweet at the top of this Twitter space. If you respond to that pinned tweet with your question and use hashtag Visionaries Podcast, my team will reach out to you to bring you up to ask a question. So bring all of your pressing Counter-Strike 2 questions, maybe even ones he can't answer, but you can ask them. We'll let you ask them. So go for it. So what do you think about the public reaction of the past week or so around the release of CS2? Like, what are your general thoughts? What have you seen, heard, be it from like your peers or your viewers, etc.? Like, how do you think people are feeling about it so far? Does it feel like it was the right time to roll it out? Does it feel polished enough for people to start looking at it and showing it? What are your thoughts?
I wish they'd kind of show more of it, to be honest. I know why I feel like the reason they're not is because they're really trying to make sure that they're getting focused like feedback rather than a lot of feedback. So that's why it's like super limited and only Dust 2, as much as I hate it. It's just, I think they want very specific feedback overall. And I think like overall the public kind of reaction to it is, I don't know. I didn't really think about it till just now. I would say my peers, as always with Counter-Strike players, there's a lot of players that don't like it right off the bat, because anytime you change anything in Counter-Strike, they don't like it. There's just always a group that, I feel like that's every game, but in Counter-Strike we have a lot of people that are very strong with their opinions in that way. It's fine. That's normal. I think that usually those people end up being a meme later on. For example, there's the Zonic tweet where he said that Counter-Strike Global Offensive will never be bigger than 1.6 or whatever. I can't remember the exact tweet, but stuff like that, people get a little grand, and when they get a little grand and kind of overarch, I definitely think some people have gone a little too far off the deep end, but I don't know, it's normal. A lot of people are excited, which is cool. I've got to play with like a lot of my friends that I grew up streaming with. Like Summit is literally the one that got me into streaming. Shroud and I were teammates. I used to carry Tim every morning all the time. Like, he almost went pro, as he always likes to tell people. Not really, but that's the story. We'll stick with it. So it's been really fun, like seeing those people come back to the game like engaging with the game again, because I just don't get to play that often with them. So I mean, I think from that side of it, I'm happy. Like a lot of people that love Counter-Strike, have always loved Counter-Strike, have a reason to come back and check it out again. And I think they want more than Dust 2. I mean, Summit's been playing 10 mans, but after a couple, it's kind of like, all right, well, do you want to queue Dust 2 the 5th time tonight? Like, not really, you know? So
yeah.
Overall, I think
you can only get shot so many times in the same spot, over and over and over again, and it's like pit, you know.
But like, to the people that are unhappy with it, I get it. Like, it's not that they're even what they're saying is wrong, but I also think people are very quick to forget how terrible Go was at the start, or they just weren't around. Which, like, to be fair, that's fine. But if you were around during Go and you're still saying stuff like this, and you don't have faith in the Valve team, the dev team, I think you're kind of insane. I'm biased because I literally got to go to their offices and see them work and do what they did. So I know that, like, I'm sitting from a position that's very different than most people, because they don't get to see that. They don't know. Like, nobody knows what they're doing or what they just don't know. And that side of it I get. But Go was terrible. Go was straight up awful when it came out. There's just no sugarcoating. It was a terrible game. And 1.6 was absolutely better. And people like me that played Source just knew, well, this is going to be our game, or this game's going to die. So we might as well just switch. And over time, after Hidden Path, was done working on it and Valve took over, then we got the game that we now know. And over time, it became the game that we love. And they absolutely got it to this point where so much, I would say, of Go is great. It's just, the things that frustrate people are just limitations with the engine right now. And when I was there in Seattle, the whole dev team, their entire purpose of Counter-Strike 2, whatever you want to call this Counter-Strike, is to ensure Counter-Strike's success for the next 10 years. They don't want to change Counter-Strike. Sure, they added a new nade interaction and stuff like that, but their whole purpose is to take what they have that they already know is great and just simply make it a little bit better and make sure that they can continue to improve it for the next 10 years. And I feel like that's exactly what I want to hear if I'm a CSGO player. Like, I love Counter-Strike, like CSGO. I don't want it to change really. But do I want one ways to go away? Yeah. Do I want smoke bugs to go away? Absolutely. Do I want skybox mollies to disappear? Do I want Molotov? Yes. Like, so many things that I think people already forget, like, that we've just accepted and go. Like, we don't have to deal with that anymore. It's gone. The big bad boogeyman is gone now. You don't have to. Now you have to deal with me randomly finding wall hacks in the console. But that's, we found it in the limited tests and everything. And I even did it in a private 10-man. So everybody's okay, But I think, like, it's okay from both sides. It's normal. I mean, it's just gaming. Like, everybody's really loud with their opinion. And for the people that are enjoying it, I'm happy to see them back. And the people that are critical, I'd say just be a little bit more patient. They clearly got Go to a spot that we all love it. Why would you doubt them now? Like, why would you, out of all the things, why would you doubt them with a better engine where they're just going to try to get it to the same spot they had it before? At the very least, right? Their whole point is to get it to where it was. We're not even saying, like, changing it dramatically. They just want to get it to where it was because that's how good it was. So it's, yeah.
Yeah, what you said about people not being around for Go, I think that's super crucial, right? Like, they're at the beginning of Go, right? Every game that goes on for long enough loses old players and gains new players to a certain degree. Like, I've experienced this cycle both with Counter-Strike and League as someone who's covered them and played a shit ton of both of those games. Like, Counter-Strike Global Offensive and League of Legends have changed so much in the past decade. But, like, I'm constantly meeting people who are like, I only picked this thing up like 3 years ago. And it's like, okay, well, you don't have the perspective of, like, 2012 or 2009 in the case of League, where, like, this was not great. Like, but it got there. Like, it had its moments, right? To your point, like, it evolved and the dev team evolved. And I think games as a service just generally lends itself to this, right? Like, it's not like Call of Duty where every year or on some like frequent cadence, it's completely new. And to be honest, like, I personally am, like, kind of fed up with that as somebody that played a ton of COD
you don't want to spend
previously.
$60 every year for the same game that's just in a new era.
It's not the money though for me. It's like the fact that, like, at least when they were doing the alternating shit where it was like Treyarch and Infinity Ward would, like, flop back and forth, and so it's like every other year I would get something that I felt comfortable with, right? Like if I was a big like Infinity Ward player in Modern Warfare 2, it'd be like, all right, 2 years from now I'll feel better about where I'm at, right? Like see you next year. Like I'll play some of the other game, but whatever. I would much rather a singular game evolve over time than necessarily like, completely changed. And I think, it's very unique. It's very rare that games have that longevity to them. They really have only been 2, and that, I guess 3. Like World of Warcraft has had that moment too, but it does have expansions and new game content as well. But like it's WoW, League, and Counter-Strike. Those are the only ones that have stayed so relevant for so long.
Dota?
That
you're gonna leave out Dota like that? No way.
Dota changed a lot though. Actually, like Dota 2 was a huge jump. So yeah, like Dota 2 was a huge jump. Dota 2 Reborn was a bigger jump than I think Counter-Strike 2 will be, actually. It was a pretty big change. So, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I haven't played CS2 yet. I'm really excited. Hey, Valve, Counter-Strike folks, if you're listening, yeah, give me a code. I'd love to give it a shot. I haven't played enough active hours to get in like a normie. So, but at least the smoke grenade change, I'm really excited about. I like saw that and I was like, oh god, that's like so cool.
It was
yeah, I'm sure it changes it.
It was
yeah.
I always love telling the story. Like me and Get Right, one of the, I don't even know how this happened. Second round of the playtest, we won pistol. Me and Get Right are like, let's go window on Mirage. We're gonna farm them. We're gonna get some eco kills. We both swing window. They smoke top mid, and nobody knew. Like Valve they didn't tell us anything about the game. And somehow Moses, the caster, figured out that the interaction was there, and he naded it himself, and we killed all of them. And me and Chris were just like, we were ecstatic, man. You should have. I really hope at some point I get the recordings, because we recorded everything not for content, but like to like see if like anything weird happened, glitches, and like just listening back to me and Get Right, like just yelling like at the top of our lungs when we saw the smoke just dissipate and we got to see their whole team top mid. It was incredible. It was a great experience, because we just didn't know. Like I found out live in the middle of a game that you could nade smokes, and they wouldn't. Yeah, so that's kind of how that playtest would go. Is I'd be like, hey, what's the tick rate? They'd be like, what do you want it to be? Like, and stuff like that. It's like, what do you think it is? Like, it's like, all right, man, you guys are pissing me off. Like, so yeah, it was a good time though.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that it will. I think the biggest thing for me is I'm hopeful it brings more people into this game. I think that Valorant brought a different user base into tag shooters for the first time, and I'm not of the opinion. I've seen like Monte Cristo and other people say this, where it's like, so long Valorant, peace bitches. Like this, you're done for. Like all the kiddies are finally gonna like level up, and it's like no. I'm not talking like that. I don't think that's gonna happen. But I do think there are people that, like, because Valorant looks nice, because there are certain parts of the movement that feel a little bit more new. The engine is newer. There are certain things about Valorant that I think got new players into this genre. I'm excited for them to try a new experience, to try an experience that, Counter-Strike, like, getting it, swapping between the two games right now does not feel great going from Valorant to CSGO, because it's so much older. But I'm excited for, on a new engine, people to be able to give that opportunity to be able to play this and enjoy something that the rest of us have been enjoying for decades now, basically,
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the player count, I think that already kind of happens like both ways. I think people play CS, right, and obviously played Valorant, but I also think a lot of people played Valorant, realized maybe they like the genre, but also that maybe it's not exactly what they wanted, and they also came out and check out CS. I get people like that all the time. Not saying that's a large majority of where even the player base increase, but I think that already happens with Go. So yeah, to your point, I can see that happening more. And yeah, no, I don't think Valorant's going anywhere, despite what people might think. I'm hoping that it brings a lot more of the player base back, specifically to North America, obviously as a North American streamer as well. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't hoping for that. Will that happen? I think once again it just goes back to the same circle, where I think it'll depend on the systems that they implement when the game comes out, how accessible it is for a lot of people, and I think it goes both ways, and both games can actually rise in popularity together, despite everybody always trying to make you pick a side. Essentially, I went on a whole entire rant today of how I think people basically treat video games that they play as like almost like a political party. And it's gotten to the point where people actually just like, they can't, there's no nuance anymore to discussion. There's no, you can like this and like that. No, it's you either on my side or you're not. You know what I mean? And it's just gotten so, I'm not saying that gaming has always been a positive space, but this definitely is, I think it's definitely evolved into a bit more, I don't know, like if you like Counter-Strike, there's no way you and I could be friends type thing. It's like, you got to be kidding me. Like you're out of your damn mind. But I feel like that's how it's gone sometimes. But in general, I would really like to see both games. And I'm not just saying that to kind of be, I just think that you might play one. Maybe you get kind of pissed off that like you can't like do certain things that you can do in Valorant, and you go back to Valorant. And then when you're back in Valorant and you're doing those certain things, maybe the guy that's playing smokes can't throw the smokes that you fucking want. So you're like, I'm going to go throw my own fucking smokes. And Counter-Strike, you're going to come back to that. So why can't they both just be good games that you want to play? And maybe you get certain experiences out of both that you enjoy.
This is the one time that I agree with being a fence sitter, because I'm on the same side as you. Because I can already envision the YouTube comment that is like, why is this stupid interviewer asking about Valorant so much? And it's just like, all right, man, like I like this. I like both games too. I play both games. They're both fun. They have their own unique experiences. So you and I are on the same page.
Dude, grow up.
yeah. Child game, pretty graphics. The whole thing.
You scared of Counter-Strike, dude? Scary dark realism make you not want to play, huh?
So we're gonna start taking audience questions here in the back half. We have a lot of good ones. I think the first one is from John Wheatley. Flom, this will be where you turn up your phone. John, you should be getting a speaker invite, assuming you are here in the space.
Is that what's gonna happen?
Yes, you will, and then we'll parse it into the edit.
All right, sure. I'm listening. Oh, hey, I can hear him. Hey, what up, dude?
So, first question: can we get Fl0m 5 gifted for tomorrow?
We're not getting me 5 gifted. That's not what this is about. You can't be farming 5 gifted for me.
And then, what is your plans for Mythic, competitive-wise and personnel-wise? And then, have you thought about what changes you might have to do for Mythic League?
Oh, okay. So for those of you that don't know, Mythic League is the pug service that I own that's on Faceit. And he's asking me, will I change it? Mythic personnel-wise never changes, really. So no, I don't see anybody changing on the roster unless somebody just doesn't want to play. And then I would say when it comes to Mythic League, I have no idea, because that's like pretty much on Faceit. Faceit kind of dictates how all that goes. I don't really have any say. I mean, obviously I get like power in terms of a voice where I can say things that I think would be good or bad. And I've seen, some things that Faceit is working on without explicitly saying what they're doing. And I know that they're trying to improve things and make it a better experience. Where that leaves Mythic League, I'm not entirely sure. It's one of those things where I just kind of do it because I enjoy doing it. And if it makes sense to continue it in CS2, then I will. If it doesn't, I mean, I don't want necessarily things to just completely dissipate, but if there's not a need for it, then it won't have to exist anymore, and that's okay with me as well. Like I said, it'll just kind of be dependent on what Faceit like direction is when it drops in CS2.
Good answer. Thank you for your question as well, John. We appreciate it. The next question is going to be from Super Ghost CS. All right, I'm going to ask it. Sorry, Super Ghost. So it is Flom. Do you think that Valve will roll out 128 subtick in the future?
Oh, okay. Yeah, people have been asking me this one a lot. I mean, they can. I think that's something that people can't like. I think they absolutely can. They might. I don't know. I really don't know. I hope that they do. If they can't make the game feel the way that people kind of expect it to, especially on like 128 tick and go, I would hope that they do. I don't know if they will, but that would be my hope and what I would like to see. But I also would say give them more time with the current system, because I think there's just a lot this is all just pretty brand new, the system that they're using. At least to my understanding. I'm not going to pretend like I'm a developer and I know exactly how all this stuff works, but it seems to me that it's relatively new and going to take some time to, iron out a lot of things and change a lot of things or tweak certain things. And the tests, like, something as simple as the recoil, for example, a lot of commands that we have in Go, we don't even have in CS2 yet, that like dramatically changes how something feels whether you realize it or not. For example, the recoil, you can completely mute the recoil and go, which, so instead of having this really sporadic gun on the side while you're spraying it, it's much more reserved and it's not as shocking. Where in CS2 right now, it just feels like that thing's going to the sky, and it can make the gunplay and stuff like that feel different. So I still would argue that it probably is different, even if we get some of those commands. But those are the things that need to be tested and kind of pushed further before I think we're so far away from that point, is basically how I would answer this. Is I would hope so. If we can't get to a point where the game feels how it doesn't go on 128, I would hope that they just say, F it, we'll go to 128. But that's like a simple thing to do, right? Where like it's, if they can actually get to the root of the problem within the engine itself without even having to do that, I think that's far more interesting for them, honestly, as developers, than just simply being like, okay, 128. But they could also do that anytime they want. That's not something where they really have to go like test it. It's just, you just want to be on 64, 128. So if they can't get it right, yes, I would like to see them do that.
I think I have two follow-ups on that before we hit the next thing. I think first I would ask about like sustainability, right? Because I think that's probably the argument against it, is that there's some level of processing power of running a 128 server that a 64 server doesn't command, right? And so I would imagine there's some cost associated with doing that, right? And that whether Valve wants to take on that cost would be the biggest question. And then the second thing I was going to ask you about, there's always a lot of discussion around this. I know the difference. I've played on 128 servers, plain old LAN too, so I know what that feels like. But is the majority of players that play Counter-Strike, I don't think they've ever gotten that experience to play on 128 tick. As someone at the most basic level you can describe, how different does it feel? What is the most notable change for you playing CSGO on 128 versus 64?
Movement. It's the same. It's the things that people are complaining about right now in CS2. It's movement and sprays. So because of the way the tick rate works, sprays feel a lot smoother on 128. I think technically it's very subtle, but if I remember right, you're like it comes out faster, so like it sounds a lot more smooth basically when you spray the gun. And then movement, like on 64 tick, your feet feel like they're in molasses, which is kind of how it feels right now in CS2. Sometimes you feel good, and then other times it just feels like your feet have Elmer's glue on the bottom of them, and that's similar to how 64 tick feels. So I think like it's something that people definitely want to try, I'm sure, and people would enjoy. I definitely think that's the ideal way to play Counter-Strike global offensive. That experience is absolutely like what I would say is what you want to experience if you can. When it comes to the cost, I always see this, what you just said is kind of like the main thing, but I'm gonna be honest, man, I am pretty sure when it comes to Valve, I'm not saying they don't care about money, but I imagine the changes in the cost for a company like Valve to go from 64 to 128 is not the main determining factor as to why they don't do it. I would say it's much more likely that I won't say numbers, because if you don't have them exactly, don't say them at all. But there's a significant portion of the player base that genuinely would suffer. In Go, I don't know how it would work with CS2, but in Go, there is a large percentage of players that would be affected negatively if they went to 128. So I don't think the company that at one point, I don't know if it's still true, that makes the most money per employee in the world, I don't think them going like, oh yeah, 128 tick, do we do it? I don't know. That's a little deep. I just feel like it's much more like, hey, this is
to make it a bad playing experience, basically. Like, yeah, is the real question.
Are we going to alienate some of our players, right? Like, I think that's the bigger... That is the starting point. I'm not saying that the cost doesn't like come into effect at all. They're a business at the end of the day, and that absolutely is going to be, okay, this cost more. So you're telling me, if you're at Valve, do you want to like make the choice that you're going to negatively impact some of your current players, and it's going to cost you more money? Now all of a sudden it doesn't seem like from their side of things, it doesn't seem as like good. It's not good that also, though, we have to rely on third-party services to give us 128 tick to have a better experience that we all enjoy the way that Counter-Strike is. But also, it's kind of created an entire ecosystem outside of Valve that has thrived, I would say, and created a lot of the professional scene, a lot of the esports scene of Counter-Strike that makes it unique. So it's like this, it's a balancing act. And I think 128 tick is better. There's no denying it. But how to go about it when it comes to the overall player base, I do think there's an argument on both sides. And the only people that actually have all the information are Valve. So, it's tough to say. I've trusted them with a lot of things. They treat the game pretty well, even though people like to hear more from them. But, they've made a lot of good overall decisions when it comes to the gameplay and the balancing of the game over time. There's been hiccups. Let's not talk about the R8. I'm not gonna pretend like they don't fuck up, but I would say overall, it's pretty good.
Yeah, we're gonna end on this question, which is from HD Flood _. I don't know if they're here to ask the question. We'll give them a little bit of time if they are. Hit us with your question.
Hang on, let me just bring it up again. So I wanted to jump off the question, one of the questions earlier, where you were talking about things you'd take from other games. And now we know that Valve does care about CS2, like CS in general, going off CS2. Now that we have that sort of information, if you were part of the Valve team itself, or if you were part of one of the bigger organizations, say ESL, ESEA, Faceit, all that good stuff, what would you change about the pro scene?
Okay. Well, I mean, I love this question. I always get this one. This is a fun one. I've answered this a few times. So here, let me turn this down just a little bit on my side. I mean, as the NA guy, and as the guy that lost a lot of things in the pro scene, or at least our region, I would love to see a regional tournament system come back to North America, which was North America's Pro League, which they axed. Also, just a reminder, all three of those companies you listed are literally the same now and are all one. They do work as one giant conglomerate. And I would say, I think I understand why it happened when it did, because ESL at the end of the day is a business. And I think North American Pro League was just not it for them at the time. But also, I think they had to make a lot more short-term decisions because of the position that they were in and who they were owned by at the time, where now I think, whatever your political beliefs are, I think right now, whoever, basically who owns them, I think they can have a much more long-term outlook, which is very interesting to me because I would like to see something like that come back. I would like the idea of not just America's Pro League to come back, but basically use as a proof of concept to bring back that, have success with that first, and then bring that to other regions and basically use that to build smaller regions. Everybody knows Counter-Strike's EU dominated. I'm not even saying we get away from that. At the end of the day, every sport has a region that watches it the most, and that's okay. But also understanding that we're esports and we have the ability to have more than just these super domestic things we don't have to accept it. We're much more flexible, I would say. And doing something like bringing Pro League back and let's just say the America's Pro League, where you have North America, South America, you bring in the Aussies, you bring in different teams from the Asian scene, you bring that in first. Obviously, I'm biased and I'm saying this is the North American guy. Bring him to the US and let's have a Pro League here. But I think there's a lot of things that if that is successful, you can continue to build that and then use that as basically proof of concept for other areas within the scene that should be built up and should be brought up and given more eyeballs to, so that way we can continue to expand the esports side of things. So that is what I would like to see in the pro scene. Is I understand that the game is EU centric. I understand that that's not going to change for a while, but also if we don't do anything to ever change it, or at least attempt to, make it a little bit more accessible around in other regions, how is it ever expected to change or grow if you don't do anything about it, right? If you're just this is what it is, all good. I just kind of hate that stance, I think we should always be trying to improve and push forward. I think the Pro League we had right now is a lot better, but it's still an absolute monstrosity when it comes to the overall schedule of Counter-Strike. The fact that we have 2 and it's 5 weeks, that's insane. Now, if other regions were more heavily involved in a regional way, I think it'd be very cool though, because then you're kind of engaging each region during their time, and then you could basically have it running all day, which some people would really hate as content creators. But having each region have its own voice and its own set of players and teams that they can kind of get behind, and then rallying it that way, I think would be a much healthier ecosystem in the long term. But they've also tried it before and it wasn't all that successful, and I won't like try to sugarcoat it. I just think also now Counter-Strike's in a different spot, and there's a lot of things they can learn from the first time they did it that would improve it the second time around.
Yeah, that's fair. I do miss in a ESL Pro League. Granted, the quality matches was not always great. Sometimes people got pub stomped by the big teams, but you know, nonetheless, it was at least enjoyable to watch and fun and different. And yeah, the game diversity was good. So we're gonna end the podcast there. Thank you again, Flom, for joining us. It's been wonderful. Thank you for your insights. It's nice to have somebody on that's been hands-on with the game for some time now. We will be back next week, so if you enjoyed listening to the pod, follow the Overcome account, look for our updates. We'll be back next week. We're here every single Wednesday, so again, thanks, Flom, for joining.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And thank you, everybody, for listening. We will see you next week. We hope you have a great rest of your evening. Later, everyone.
Thanks for watching Visionaries on YouTube. For more content, please subscribe to the Overcome channel.